The first is job security is gone in a way that, I mean, this is like, I don't remember I don't think I've seen this in the course of my career, right? There's definitely been setbacks. There have been individual companies having layoffs, but just kind of this like industry-wide job security gone, that feels very new.
I mean, Kate and I have been going through this in our own careers of like, I was like, I don't know what I want. Let me try something that I think might be what I want. And then, have a very short engagement or a few coaching sessions and then see how that feels. Like, what is the feedback I'm getting internally from myself of like, was I excited to do that? Did it energize me? Did it drain me? And so it's giving people the tools to have this sort of self-feedback of like getting more in touch with what they want so that they can incrementally move towards it.
Hey, Luca here. Welcome to a new episode of the Refactoring Podcast, where every 2 weeks we interview a world-class tech leader. Today's guests, plural, are Jean, Hsu and Cate Huston. They're both extremely experienced engineering leaders and coaches, accomplished authors, and have held leadership roles at companies like DuckDuckGo, Automattic, Medium, and more. And are now running a program to help engineers and managers become, in their own words, directly responsible individuals of their careers, to navigate these complicated times, to say the least. So with Jean and Cate, we talked about exploring what you want from your career, how to be intentional about it, how to use feedback to assess how you're doing, and how AI is changing and not changing the picture. So let's dive right into the action. Welcome, Jean, and welcome, Cate. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Yeah, we're so happy to be here.
So this is the first time we have two guests in a single episode, so very excited about this. And so I will introduce both of you, starting with Jean. You're a fractional engineering leader and coach. You have more than 15 years of experience with early stage startups, and we have actually known each other for quite some time now. You were one of the first guests of the podcast like 3 years ago when it was not an official podcast yet. So happy to have you back in a way.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm happy to be back.
And Cate, you are now CTO at Twill. You're an accomplished author. You published the Engineering Leader book. Before that, you had leadership positions at DuckDuckGo, Automattic, and you're a long-time engineering coach, which is, I think, how we met online the first time. We were both coaches at Practica. We hosted a live online coaching event with other friends. So happy to have you back too.
Yeah, it's good to see you again.
Yeah. So we are here now today because you both have deep experience coaching people through career transitions, inflection points, and you have recently launched a course called DRI Your Career to help engineers and managers become DRIs, so directly responsible individuals of their career, and thrive under, to use your own words, adverse conditions. Right. So, yeah, I think there has been no shortage of this in
also
recent
known
years.
As capitalism. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. To summarize. So to get everyone on the same page to begin with, because we often say these are complicated times, right? But we often do not elaborate on that much. From your own vantage point, what makes these times adverse conditions and complicated conditions for engineers and people in tech?
I think there's two things. The first is job security is gone in a way that, I mean, this is like, I don't remember I don't think I've seen this in the course of my career, right? There's definitely been setbacks. There have been individual companies having layoffs, but just kind of this like industry-wide job security gone, that feels very new. And the second thing is that, we're upending the whole industry because of AI. And I think that generates a ton of identity threat for many developers who have been special for a long time, have felt they could do a lot of stuff. And now, there's an app for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were very pampered, right? Like the benefits, the free food, the in-office laundry, whatever, the golden age of tech feels like it's gone, maybe except at some AI companies, but for the bulk of people working in tech, it's really, yeah, kind of a wake-up call of like, okay, we're not, it's not just smooth sailing. You get into tech, you get your CS degree and then you're good to go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which I guess kind of ties to the platform, right? Like, look, when you and I met, we were doing one-on-one coaching, and that was, I think, very much a Zap era thing. Like, I mean, we still do some one-on-one coaching, but it's just much less available to people now.
Yeah.
And so the question that Jean and I have been trying to answer with DOI Your Career is, can we make the benefits of coaching available to people at a price point that's actually accessible in this time where, things are just much more constrained?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I love that you mentioned these two factors, like job security and AI uncertainty. And of course, the two might be related. No one knows exactly how much. But I don't know about you, but I also know people who are affected or concerned just by one of them and not by the other, in the sense that there are people who don't feel kind of uncertain or threatened by AI, but they're pretty much concerned about job security because of everything that's going on. And there are also people instead who are not fearing really for their job, but they don't know what to make out of their career because of everything that's happening with AI. They feel like their craft has been taken away from them and many different things. So they feel two correlated but also separate problems to me in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, I don't believe that any of the layoffs, whatever they're saying about AI gains, I don't believe they're driven by AI gains. I think they're driven by two things. One is just organizational debt based on poor management for long periods of time that is now being addressed. And the second thing is, I actually think that those layoffs are supposed to make it more possible to drive the organizational gains from AI, because a small organization, and particularly one where people feel more under threat, people are more likely to adapt to a change and go with it than one where that's not the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it can be a really scary time. And I remember talking to Cate, maybe right around when I was leaving my last job and figuring out what was next. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll go back into like, executive coaching. And I prefer to coach like the more ICs, like emerging managers, but they don't have the budgets. And Cate's like, oh, well, actually, I've heard those budgets are getting slashed too, which sounds like, oh, well, how am I going to make a coaching income? But actually, the flip side of that was, well, if you're not going to be able to make money doing the thing you thought you could make money doing, why not just do the thing you actually want, right? Like, so we built this course really for ICs, early year, mid-career folks, instead of like the people who didn't have access to coaching, as much access to coaching to begin with.
Yeah,
so there is like an opportunity there too when the like the pampered lifestyle in tech is gone. It kind of creates a little bit less of a like contrast of, okay, I can make a ton of money doing this, or do the thing I actually want. Like if the money and the job security comes down, it's like, oh, actually, why don't I just do the thing I want to begin with?
So one of the things you see in like one-on-one coaching is that obviously everybody's different and everybody brings whatever's going on with them, but there are some relatively common journeys that people have a pretty consistent arc through. And so we cannot possibly replicate like all the benefits of one-on-one coaching in the system we have, but we're trying to take the common arcs and the common journeys and systematize them so that people have a supported way to go through them. And then we do provide one-on-one feedback, but because we do it in a text-based way, we're just able to do it at a price point that's like the equivalent of, 1 to 2 coaching sessions normally. And, I really believe in the power of coaching. I really believe that people need somebody to like see and support them without being dependent on them. And so I am really excited. We're just starting our second course. We just wrapped up our first course, and just seeing people go on this journey and being there to support them has been, I think we believed in it when we shipped it, but it has been even more kind of meaningful and real than I expected.
Hey, if you're using AI to code, you know the pain. Too many terminal panes, multiple agents running at once, copy-pasting context between them, and trying to remember which branch has what. So the bottleneck is not writing code anymore, it's coordinating the agents. And I've been trying a new app these days from Augment Code called Intent, purpose-built to solve this problem. Intent is a developer workspace built for orchestrating agents, not just running them side by side. It starts with the living spec that updates as agents make progress, so every task stays aligned with no manual coordination. Intent works best with Augment's Augie and their context engine, but you can also bring Cloud Code, Codex, or Open Code. Intent is what comes after your IDE. Try it for yourself at augmentcode.com/intent. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And when I went through the course page and how you packaged it and the way it works, it really made me think. Having been like a former coach myself, that I'm a believer that we need way more coaching in the industry that we do have right now. But I felt what you said before, that is. We go from with coaching, we often go from zero, like not having any kind of support, to something that is very expensive for companies, like $500  1 hour or something like that. That becomes something that is worth or perceived as affordable just for senior leadership, maybe, and that instead would provide a lot of value, even for people across the whole spectrum and ladder. But sometimes has felt to me like there is no middle ground between zero and hero, and so it feels like there's something missing in the type of support you can get.
Oh, yeah. And I would like to think that we actually created something that is more appealing, because at first we were talking about like half-day workshops, and we kind of sat on it. We're like, engineers don't want to show up for half-day Zoom workshops.
Neither do we.
We didn't want to show up for half-day Zoom. Yeah, we just like sat on it, and we're like, okay, maybe this means something that we actually don't want to
you say
deliver.
that's engineers who don't want, but it's really you who don't want to do that.
It's true. I would be trying to get Jean to contour,
Right.
Jean would be like, Cate, why are you so
I don't have
obsessed
time
with
to
contour? Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I think there is something to the busy introvert engineer who wants to put in their headphones, go for a walk, listen to our content, and then us wanting to record and then be able to like edit it and not have to show up live, to be able to like provide coaching feedback in our docs. Like, yeah, it just is a really good fit, I think, for this audience.
Oh, it's so fun. Like, I love everything about it, except for when Jean puts back too many instances of the word like. But like, other than that, I'm just absolutely delighted with this. Like, it's so fun for us. And I think people can tell that, like, if you genuinely enjoy something, then I think that shines through.
Yeah, I love that. So to go back to let's explore this a little bit. Going back to the idea of taking ownership of your career, right? I think the hypothesis that grants all of this, which I mean, it's what I've observed also in my career, is that many people are just not doing that. They're like swung by circumstances or kind of sleepwalking into their careers. So first of all, would you agree with that? And second is, why do you think it's the case? It's because we've been pampered as engineers and hand-fed for a long time. It's because tech is generally tricky to figure out. What do you think is the case?
I think when everything was going up and to the right and people were getting promoted anyway, like, why do you need to be awake? Why do you need to think critically? Why do you need to worry about this? If in this special era, you're an engineer, you show up, you try and do a good job, and if you feel that your current company undervalues you, you go and get another job. Like, you don't, like, it was very like hammer and nail, and I think this is the thing we're trying to do with the DRI, your career course, is to be like, you can have a whole toolbox available to you. Sometimes you need the hammer and the nail, fair enough, but not all the time,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's definitely like very timely. I think in general in an engineer's career, though, the first few years are a little bit more like you just put in the hours, the junior IC to senior IC growth path is pretty well established. And then from like senior IC, then do you become a tech lead? Do you become an EM? What do you actually want? That is like across the board more difficult and requires more intentionality to figure out. And then on top of that, what we're seeing in the tech industry nowadays is just making it like 10x more difficult.
Oh, totally. And also, before the pandemic, it was I always felt like, if I wanted a certain kind of job, I had to move to a certain kind of city. And the pandemic was very liberating. Like you could, like remote work was much more available. And it was the first time where I felt like, having decided to live in Ireland wasn't necessarily a huge compromise for my broader career, right? And that's definitely gone back now. But, it doesn't mean that people can just, when people have had a taste of like, I can prioritize my life as well, it's very hard to just go straight back to being like, and now I must move to this major city.
Yeah, no, I agree, it makes a lot of sense. So if I was, let's say, an engineer looking at your course and thinking about my career, I think the first question I would ask myself is, how do I even assess whether I'm doing okay or I'm a little bit sleeping and I should be more intentional about my career? I mean, how do I even know how I'm doing?
So you could take my What Raccoon Are You quiz, because I think...
We need to talk about raccoons.
We do need 14 minutes in before the raccoons came out.
Probably less, because we can cut down some pillow words. We should make a better quiz for the course. But actually, hilariously, I meant to make a quiz that's like, are you the DOI of your career? And then instead I made a quiz about what raccoon are you under capitalism. Yeah.
That's pretty departure from the original intent, but it probably works anyway.
It was more fun.
It is a lot more fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can link. We'll send it to Luca to link up in the show notes. But I think, one thing I noticed just in talking to folks is just the language they use. Like when people are like, I guess I'm going to try to move into management, and like, well, what do you want out of that? What's important to you about that? And they're like, well, it just seems like the natural next step. And with the jobs going away, it seems like it'll be safer in management. And I'm like, I don't know if that's the case.
Are you really sure
kind of a lot
that?
of, there's a lot of like shoulds. There's a lot of, this is the natural progression of the career ladder that's been put in place by like VCs. Like it doesn't really benefit us as individuals, as the career ladder doesn't really benefit us as individuals. And so, I think you could look for a lot of like, what are your goals, and are they actually things you want? Are there things you're actually motivated to move towards, or are they things that you just think you should be doing?
Yeah, I think tying to that, it's like, how important is outside validation to you? Like, is your idea of career growth getting promoted, and you don't get promoted, you're devastated? Like, that's kind of a sign that you're letting other people define what it is that you want in your value, rather than, to Jean's point, anchoring yourself on your intrinsic value and your values and what you actually want to do.
Yeah. So I think a lot of my questions during this interview would be along the lines of, and how do you do that? And how do you do that in response to your answers? So you said at some point that you need to compare kind of where you're at with what you actually want, and do what you want from your career, as opposed to doing just what you think you're supposed to because the letter says so, the framework says so. But the question might be, how do you even figure out what you really want? I mean, I know probably many people who wouldn't be able to answer this question from the standpoint of their career, at least.
Totally. I mean, this is, Jean, you should ask him your peak moment question.
What's my peak moment question?
Like, tell me about a peak moment in your career, and what were you doing? And
you just asked him.
But you do it better. You ask him. Yeah.
What was a peak moment in your career, Luca?
That's a good question. So, peak moment means a moment where I was happy or I felt accomplished. So, peak about how I felt about myself. You mean that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think I would pick some moments from, I mean, I always loved to see people grow on my team. So the hiring, I mean, I'm a former founder and CTO of a startup here in Italy. And we hired a lot of junior engineers, many times fresh out of university. And so I've always loved to see them become like better versions of themselves, and getting to senior levels and accomplished engineers. So moments of celebration within the team that marked some great team accomplishment, and where people displayed great growth and became what they wanted to become, gave me a great sense of purpose also about what I was doing. That felt some oftentimes better than just, we have grown revenues this way, or we are able to raise the next funding round. Yes, of course, this is really good, but there's something different and special about seeing people around you growing. So this is not probably one single moment or a peak moment. Yeah, but
That's
it's more
beautiful.
like a vibe.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And tell me, like, what does it look like for you personally to thrive? Like, what kind of things are you doing where you feel like, wow, I'm really working to my strengths, I'm having a lot of impact?
That's another great one. So I've always felt that, coming from a long time founder background, I'm a bit of a jack of all trades and a generalist. So I think I'm able, when I work on technical projects, to make the best contributions when I can connect the dots between different things. And so kind of glue work connecting things like technical strategy and product and startup things. And when it comes to instead people and team, I think that being a little bit also of a people pleaser, I really want people around me to feel comfortable and happy about what they do. And so I go after that relentlessly, maybe even to a fault sometimes, but that's something that comes natural to me. There are downsides to that, probably, right? But that's something I go after naturally.
Okay, great. So, we've been talking, was it 20 minutes now? And those two questions told us more about what would be good for your career than any job title you've ever had.
Love that.
Yeah.
I also love answering the questions.
Go ahead.
I mean, these were two simple questions. Were not simple to answer. Already made me think a lot about my choices, my career, what I might want to do next, if I ever decide not to be like a full-time writer. And so, yeah. And I got that for free.
Yeah. Imagine what you get if you paid us, Luca.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different, coaching tactics and exercises that we have built into the course that help people figure out. Yeah, but just thinking about, when did you feel at your peak, right? When do you feel what do you feel like you need to thrive? These are just some simple questions that help get at some of what you really need and what you really want, and also some of your values. So we have a section where you do kind of a values discovery exercise, which also kind of very simple on the surface, but then the feedback we got was people were I've never done that, this is really amazing. And as coaches, we're is this values discovery, right? But this is also an audience that hasn't done a lot of coaching work and these type of exercises. So I feel like there's a lot of there's just a lot of opportunity for folks to get more intentional about what they want in their lives and their careers. And also some of it's just practice, right? Someone's oh, I really want a dog. I'm not telling people to go adopt a dog, but just getting more in touch with what they want.
Yeah, or a raccoon.
Even outside of work. Yeah,
Totally. There's an element of this is why people journal, but many people don't journal. And why don't they journal?
Yeah.
It feels pointless to do it for themselves, and there's no accountability. Right. And so
we have forced journaling.
Yeah, forced journaling. But like, we actually read it. And right. You know, we do, like, there is this mindset of coaching of coming in believing the person is naturally capable, resourceful, and whole. And that's how we come to our comments. And so there are places, you know, there's definitely some people who submitted their exercises, and I just went through and left hearts on it. I'm like, I have no notes. Like, you have gone on this journey beautifully. And then there's sometimes people who they get a bit stuck, or they're getting in their own way or something, and there we'll come in and ask some questions that try and push them through the stuck, or kind of try and articulate like what actually it is they want to do, to get clear about it and commit to it. And that, I think, is why people have a coach rather than just talk to themselves. You know, it's like, you know, it's a mirror, but it's a mirror that is trying to support you and show you your best self.
I love it framed this way. And I also think that, I mean, it lends itself beautifully to be done asynchronously also, because, I mean, some of these questions are deep and you may want to think about this. And I think there is also power in writing them down, even if it was, as you said, just for yourself, right? And then maybe you share them with a coach asynchronously, and they send notes. So yeah, totally.
Yeah. I mean, I hadn't thought that we were forcing journaling on people, but I do think the accountability and the deadline, right? Like, submit by this date if you want us to review it. And then we are a little bit lax on the deadline because we just want to support people. But, you know, at 10 p.m. Pacific time, I start to see the, like, you know, the submissions coming through and people staying up late to do it. But I'm like, well, whatever. If the deadline was helpful for you to actually do the work, like, I'm glad we have it, right? Just something that's, submit it whenever you want. Like, I think that would not be as effective.
Totally. Yeah. I was thinking about, like, something we've been talking about is moving. We've been having this cohort model, and we'll want to kind of create an on-demand version. I was thinking about this earlier of, like, you know, do we want to say, well, you submit the previous one to get the next one? Do we want to give people a kind of, okay, you can have that, but in a 1 to 4 week frame? Or do we want to put people on this 2 week frame? And I think that all of those questions, like, I think all of those answers could be completely reasonable, but what they come down to is, one, what kind of accountability helps people actually show up for themselves? Because this is all we're trying to do. Like, if somebody got everything out of this course and they never submitted anything, they just did it for themselves, and they're like, I'm fine, I didn't need you. Like, that's great, you know? But that accountability of knowing that somebody else is actually going to read what you wrote, I think, is really helpful. And so many people have such a hard time prioritizing their own needs. And so a lot of what we're doing is trying to create a structure where somebody can say at the start of it, I want to prioritize myself. I'm going to pay this money. I'm going to commit this time. And then every module, we're like, this is here because you chose to prioritize yourself, and we're here with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is super helpful because, I mean, as in the spirit of coaching, that we treat people like resourceful people and capable people. I think in many cases, these are super smart people who most of the times they know what they should do, or they know many things about themselves, but they sometimes lack, I think, the momentum, the little nudge, you know, the accountability to really take what they need, what they want to, and so I think that this should really work, and I think that's the type of nudge that many people need to keep the ball rolling, to get the ball rolling at start, and then it snowballs from there. I don't know.
I hope so.
And these are like doers, right? Like, we're all like high achieving people who want to get stuff done. Yeah. And so it is counterintuitive to be like, okay, now take some space and don't think about getting things done. Think about take some space to figure out what you want, so that you can move in that direction, that more exploratory phase that is often necessary before you figure out what you want and then go for it. I think that's really, that can be really challenging for a lot of folks in tech. And so putting a little bit of structure around it so it also feels like you're doing stuff
Yes.
while really what we're doing is making you create space to like
to
think about.
Yes.
Exactly. I mean, I'm so excited about like our newest EM course because I just feel really strongly that nobody needs this more than EMs, you know?
Yeah.
Like new EMs have the hardest job, the least support. They're often in this position because, you know, it's like your point of saying, oh, I'm a bit of a people pleaser. Sometimes it went too far. You know, that gets exhausting. How do you have boundaries? How do you hold people accountable? And, you know, these people are showing up every day for their team. They're trying to do a great job. Nobody is supporting them and they get exhausted. And like, that's the person we created this course for. And I just feel really strongly that I've just seen so many EMs that just really need this.
Yeah. So speaking of EMs and versus ICs, when we're designing this curriculum, this type of questions and support, have you found that any of this is different for ICs versus how it is for managers, or is the individual work pretty much the same to steer your career?
We have a big section for the EM course about energy management because, as Cate said, you're always giving to your team. It's easy to take on way too much and burn yourself out. And I think this is probably the cause for a lot of folks who try out EM and then say, oh, it's not for me. I prefer IC. I think there are, reasonable reasons to do that, but I think a lot of folks just take on more than what is actually required for the EM role. They're trying to make their team happy. They're, maybe taking on personal issues and like one-on-ones. And so, I do think it is. I mean, a lot of it's the same, but the exercises and the modules that we built are really targeted towards EMs because there's a lot of commonalities in the challenges that they face.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a different angle on the same problem. And in the EM course, we think a lot about people managing a lot of responsibility, whereas for the individual course, it's much more about what power do you have and how do you use it.
That's very interesting. And so I think, if I think about kind of a next step, when you have kind of figured out what you want from your career, the direction you want to grow into, you have more clarity about that, then I guess it comes the time to put that into action. And if you're already like working in an organization, you're not on the job market, I think you need somehow to map what you found about yourself onto what your organization needs, right? And figure out how you grow inside that environment. Am I correct? How do you do that?
I mean, that is basically the course, right? But like, I think a couple of things is like, one, figuring out your tractable goals and what you want to do. And the second is figuring out what will help you get there, with a portion of that being, how do you actually get the feedback that you need? Like, there is this really common thing in tech where people who are very good at their job, they just don't get feedback. It's like, you're doing a great job. Just keep going. But it doesn't mean these people don't need feedback or that they wouldn't benefit from it. But we end up in this phrase, this is very like the EM course on feedback, like feedback is such a loaded phrase that then people don't like have feedback conversations until it's like a feedback conversation. And this is the problem EMs have. And then the problem on the other side ICs have is like, nobody's told me anything. They're just like, great job, keep doing what you're doing. And that is not, tremendously useful information. And so on both sides of it, it's like, how do you make feedback much more of a ongoing conversation where like the goal of feedback is not to like have a feedback conversation. It's to understand what's working and what's not. And coming back to this idea that like a coach is like a supportive mirror of your best self, like, like a lot of feedback is like, it's a funhouse mirror, it's like somebody's telling you something that just says way more about them than it does about you, but it doesn't mean that there's no information there.
Mm.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to say, Luca, is like it's also not a like one and done, right? Like, oh, I figured out what I want in my career and now I just have to make it
Yeah.
happen, right? Like
Yeah.
it's kind of an ongoing process. And like, I mean, Cate and I have been going through this in our own careers of like, I was like, I don't know what I want. Let me try something that I think might be what I want. And then, have a very short engagement or a few coaching sessions and then see how that feels. Like, what is the feedback I'm getting internally from myself of like, was I excited to do that? Did it energize me? Did it drain me? And so it's giving people the tools to have this sort of self-feedback of like getting more in touch with what they want so that they can incrementally move towards it. So a lot of the timeframes we talk about are like, what's something you want to move towards in the next 3 months, right? It's not like, this is where my career is heading. I want to be a CTO, right? Like anything I need to do to get there. It's more like, okay, I want to be more, I want to grow my network of peers. And so one thing I'm going to do is reach out to people I used to work with once a week, right? Like very, very simple things that move you to some like next objective that you know that you want, but that'll then give you more information on where to go from there.
Yeah, I love the focus on feedback and also this last bit about network. And so I want to touch more on this. I agree that feedback is such a loaded word, and I think that part of that is because of this bias that I've met many managers, many people who basically just gave out negative or corrective feedback, right? And because they thought that's what feedback is about, to correct something that you do, and they almost never gave like kind of reinforcement feedback that is keep doing what you're doing because it's a good thing. And and I think many people maybe might be doing good things at work and they don't know whether they're good things or not because there is nobody that is telling them, because they think it's fine, so I don't need to say anything.
Yeah, I mean, this is where, like, I think engineers, we would benefit from reading some social science, right? Because it's one thing to be like, green test passing is expected, only action needed on red, right? But like, that doesn't work with human beings, right? There's a ton of data that shows if you want to have a good relationship with somebody, you want to have 7 positive interactions to every, like, -1, right? And this is like,
I thought it was 5. I got to
5. I don't know, whatever. It's more than 1, you
5
know.
To 7, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you want to have a good relationship with somebody, where when you have to tell them something that's not good, they'll listen to you. The best, easiest, most rewarding thing you can do is just every time they do something good, and is like notice and tell them.
Yes, I agree.
This is not even just like top down too, right? This is like doing this with your peers. And yeah, like my last job, it was like a joke that I had, if anybody said anything nice to me about somebody else, I'd be like, have you told them? You know? And step 1 was me saying this constantly, right? Step 2 was people would ping me this and say, and I should tell them. And then step 3 was, when I said, and have you told them, they'd be like, yes, of course. And then step 4, I like stopped asking because I knew they were doing it. It would be insulting to ask this person who I know, and this is like building a culture of appreciation across the team. And when people know that that you see what is good about them, then they are much more open to your point of view on what they can do better.
Yes.
Yeah, because then when you do have critical feedback to deliver, they trust that you are telling them because you actually want to help them, because you have been a helpful and supportive teammate to them, whether you're a manager or not, right?
Yeah, and I also think that, I mean, people need to use feedback as a way to assess how they're doing as a whole, right? And so chances are, and so as a whole means the good things and the bad things. And so even if we don't look at all the research and social science, even if we speak from, experience, even if you look at your low performers in your team, chances are probably they're doing like at least 80% of the things right. And so if they need to have a fair assessment of how they're doing, your feedback should probably be still mostly positive reinforcement things and a few here and there things that can be done better. But if they only hear negative things, not only they get depressed and there is all the human element of that, but even, from a purely, engineering practical points of view, you that's not complete information about how you're doing.
Yeah.
Except Luca, I had Asian parents, so I'm very used to it. I'm good with negative feedback. I take negative feedback as positive feedback. Not bad is like, wow, you're doing really good. So I do think there's some calibration, right? Like I had a manager who was very upfront. He was like, oh yeah, I'm really not good at positive feedback. So instead I just try to make opportunities for people. And I was like, oh, okay, well, you have done that for me, so I'm going to just interpret that as positive feedback.
Yeah. This makes me think that, like, we don't give each other enough positive feedback. But, like, Jean did leave me a really positive voice note once, and I was like, I really felt so special. So this Asian parent thing maybe does work.
Yeah. Like, carefully doled out.
Exactly. It came out of nowhere, but I treasure it. I'm just trying to get back to it.
Yes. You have saved it to listen it back to it.
Exactly. Every
Yeah.
night when I can't sleep. Yeah.
I love this. So I love that so far we haven't basically touched on AI. Yes, at the beginning, but all of this that we have discussed so far hasn't discussed AI in any shape or form. Which, trust me, on a podcast now, it's quite rare. But do you think there is any of this there is any that AI is bringing to the table that should make you change how you think about your career on some practical level? Or you think that these fundamentals are 100% the same, and so it shouldn't change how you think about this?
This is so interesting because Jean and I use AI a lot. But we use AI to make everything more efficient so that we can lean into the really human sides of what we're doing. And so it's allowing us to get more done and have more reach. But, then we spend our like human time on human things.
Yeah.
And the machine does so much other stuff for us that makes it possible for us to do more human things. And then in terms of the broader question of your career, I think it depends what you're doing, right? Like in our case, this is very much how we're using it to like lean into this, to automate things that are not interesting to us or we're bad at. To build a platform, which I don't think either of us actually has the expertise to build without Claude. I honestly thought Jean did for a long time.
You're like, I'm bad with config. I'm like, so am I.
Yeah, we found this out last week. We were both just like talking to Claude, being like, this is my personal deficiency. But, on the other side, like as a fractional CTO and like trying to figure out how to build it, like it's changed everything, But do I believe that engineering skills are still valuable? Yes, but I need to, if I'm going to hire somebody, I need to hire somebody who's willing to use them in a different way and who is adaptable. And this is really interesting to me because I have always really prized adaptability in hiring the kind of companies I worked at. But now it feels much more like, I guess before I would have argued that the adaptability was something that allowed me to hire coachable people and scale a team, right? And now I'm like, hiring adaptability is just necessary for functioning.
Yeah, that's a great point.
To answer your question too, Luca, I don't think, I do think people need to think, hard about their careers. I don't think you can have your head in the sand. And I think the foundations are still the same, right? Like the things, the adaptability, and maybe this is because I've worked in early stage startups for the last 15 years, but right, like curiosity, adaptability, autonomy, resilience, these are all attributes that make people successful in these environments. And those are all the things that will help people be successful in this new world that's like AI, AI tooling, all the new tools. Yeah.
This is our next course, actually, and we went back and forth a lot about it. We thought about it a lot, and we had our period of being like really intimidated of, are we good enough at AI to teach other people?
We're not on the
we're
not on the cutting edge to like
totally. Yeah. And then it was like, wait, we're not teaching people anything. This is about a journey of navigating a transition, and that is something that I think as coaches we're very equipped to do. And we've also been navigating that transition, and so we have a lot to share about what it looks like. And the shift from being kind of skeptical to, I would say, like AI enabled, you delegate certain things to it, AI enhanced. Like there was a period where I was DOSing Jean because Claude and I were on fire, and now we had to put all our workflows in the bin to be kind of AI foundational in the way that we work together.
Yeah. I love this. I mean, I know many engineers who, I wouldn't say exactly they're AI skeptical, but I think they put on a bit of resistance, whether they realize it or not. It's like they kind of restrain themselves, to fully embrace. Not embrace in the sense of from tomorrow I stop writing code, right? But to approach things with a completely open mind. If you've seen people navigating this and turning from one camp to the other camp, what do you think is it that makes them flip the switch and turn them into enablers and experimenters? Yeah.
Well, I think the three of us all are all in situations where we're not dealing with like a top-down mandate, right? Like I feel like I would be resistant to a top-down mandate because it just kind of amplifies the kind of like leadership being like butts in seats, work more, AI. It's just like AI on top of that just feels like salt on the wound, right? Yeah. And I think the three of us have had the space to explore on our own, learn, like be drawn by our curiosity. And so I think for folks who are resistant, this is a big part of our course, is like to build something on your own outside of your work environment where you have that space to play, to be a beginner, to not feel like I'm being judged because I'm not as far ahead as this other person. So I think that's really important.
I think that's true. I think also like I've been on this journey more recently, but like even 6 months ago, AI for me, the main thing was that people were using it to generate rafts of nonsense that I was then expected to review, right? And so like, I have some productivity gains from AI, like very small, but I was actually experiencing a much bigger productivity loss from it. Yeah, and it was a big problem for me, honestly. And then I guess like I started doing my own project. This was a big light bulb moment. I gave up using DuckAI and just went all in on Claude. But lately I got a new Claude for work. And this thing was annoying the shit out of me because my personal Claude, I have trained very well to work with me the way I want to work. But the new one was all over the place. So I had to go and like get the prompt, put it in, and then it got a lot better. And this was such a kind of empathy moment for me. I'm like, oh, this thing actually is really annoying until you get it to be good. And I found myself trying to explain to my chiropractor how to do something yesterday. She's like, how can I do? And I was like, well, you can do this, that, and the other. And I was like, look, you're going to do the first one. It's going to be really annoying and it's not going to work very well. But the second one will be much easier. And I'm like, oh, I think we have to be more empathetic to people and like help them get through this like first round of frustration, because this is probably why I'm optimistic about engineers ultimately, is because you do need to systematize, you do need to break things down, and Jean is continually mocking me because I insist on staying on the $20 plan, but I'm like, this is good for me. It's teaching me how to be efficient. Exactly. And I tell you what, Jean, this week I had extra credit, so I just built a Mac OS app whilst I was at the chiropractor. I'm like multitasking, but this, right? But it is this like, I don't think the usability is great. I do think the learning curve is not great. I think to Jean's point, if you're already under pressure and you are getting dosed by nonsense, and then it's like, use the nonsense machine. Like, I don't think that is a compelling thing for people. And so this is where we came to with this course of like, okay, how do we get people to be able to reclaim a little bit of time? How do we get people some space to experiment? How do we like help them be like, okay, some of this stuff is going to be bad, but some of this stuff is going to be good, and some of this stuff you can build on, and like how do you figure out the difference? And I think engineers, if we're willing to go with it, are really well placed to go through that journey. But I think it's hard, and I think there is a degree of loss that people need to process first, and that is completely understandable.
And really not very talked about, right? Like, I'm sure, Luca, you've had a lot of podcasts talking about AI, but less about the identity threat and identity shift that people need to go through in this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we don't have a lot of these conversations because we don't know how to navigate this. And also, I think, the topic of the expectations and pressure, I think it's so important. I mean, it's not just that you're dealing with this kind of grief about your craft. It's also that you feel pressured to do that because you feel your job is at stake. So there can be literally no higher pressure than that. And that, I think that makes more. Yeah.
It's much more effective for the motivation to come from genuine curiosity and joy and interest than from fear, right? Of like, oh, I better get on board, otherwise I'm going to lose my job. Like, if you're like, oh, I can build stuff for my friends and family, and
that's true. I think this is something we talk about in DIY Your Career of like, you get to choose your moment. You know, if you're in a moment where you're like, I just need stability, fair enough. Like, make the most of the stability. Sometimes you're in a moment of challenge, like make the most of that. And I think, you know, in this era, it can feel like this moment of challenge has been forced upon all of us. And not everybody is in a space to be in a moment of challenge. And so then I think for us, we're asking this question of like, how we can't change this moment of challenge, but can we make it easier on people?
It totally resonates. I mean, pressure, expectations makes me think this is now 100% related, but I saw some research. I need to find it back and put it in the show notes. There are all these games, there are simulator games, even about mundane work and stuff that people wouldn't think to put in a game, like farming simulator, truck simulator. And so people have asked themselves, well, why do people play these games? And about this work that is considered even boring sometimes. And it turns out that apparently what makes the whole difference is that when you do it as a job, there are these pressure and expectations around this. Instead, if you do it no strings attached, a lot of this can become like a peaceful experience, in mindful, and it becomes all of a sudden like enjoyable. And we never think about that, driving a truck as an enjoyable, peaceful experience, because we think about it as a job that has pressure, things you need to achieve. And so it's kind of the same thing. It's a wild analogy, but yeah.
How can we get people to approach their career growth from a more joyful and easeful place, and actually will be more effective at getting to where they want to go?
It's true. I mean, I think generally, like, a lot of the problems people have with work is they are doing emotional work about a system that does not give a shit about them, right? So if you just went through the promo cycle, you didn't get promo, and you're mad about it, you know, all those emotions, they're only for you. The organization doesn't give a shit, you know? And I'm not saying don't be disappointed or don't, I think the feelings are completely valid, but choosing what you want to do with those feelings, like, you are at choice there. And even in a situation where I think, you know, extreme example, though not as extreme as all the layoffs, right? But like, you want to get promoted, you don't get promoted, you're frustrated, right? You can choose what you want to do with that frustration. You can be mad at everybody around you. This will not make you any friends. You know, you can be resentful, you can whatever, but ultimately you are a choice. And if you say like, okay, this organization values me this much, and I'm going to focus my effort on this thing that might make them value me more, like fair enough. Or you can say this organization only values me this much, and so I'm going to draw some lines about it and I'm going to invest in something else. That's also a choice available to you. And so a lot of what like happens in coaching is like, just how do we minimize the emotional work and maximize the outcome? And once you start explaining to people like this distinction of emotional work versus work, like it can be a real light bulb moment, and they say, oh, I'm giving this effort to, like, why? They don't deserve it. I'm going to give this effort to me instead. And whatever, like, even if all you do is lie on the couch with a farming game, like, power to you. Like, that is better than just getting mad at something that you can't change.
Yeah, I love this. Also, I think perfect message to wrap up this chat. Jean and Cate, thank you so much for coming on the show. So to give us just a little bit more info about the program, when does the next cohort start? I mean, what are the key info about this?
DRA Your Career starts again mid-April. And you heard it here first. Our new AI course will start mid-May. And yeah, we would love to welcome any of your listeners.
Love that. Thank you so much. Thanks, you for
Luca.
coming on the show. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this chat valuable, you can subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the show. You can find all past episodes and learn more about the show at refactoring.fm. See you in the next episode.